not watch Candy, the 2022 miniseries about this exact same murder case. And I wonder how many people did watch Candy. Did you watch Candy? I was talking to someone about Love and Death, and then when I told them it was, the same murder case that Candy covered, my friend had watched Candy and was like, oh, well, I guess I can't watch this. And I was like, you're missing out. You're missing out. But then I didn't watch Candy. And well, I didn't watch it when it aired, but after finishing Love and Death, I hopped over to Hulu. I switched apps. I went from my screener app to the Hulu app, and I brought up Candy to compare some of the key sequences. And I gotta say, interestingly, some of the scenes and sequences are extremely similar. Like a remake. You're like, wow. I mean, it's like they must be based on the actual case files and courtroom testimony. You are very much watching the same story. But with all due respect to the talent behind Candy, when you see them back to back, it seems like a high school play compared to Love and Death. I mean, wow. It's, often who gets to the public first is paramount. And it's a real shame here because Candy just is not at the level of Love and Death. But, I think it's a real concern for Love and Death. And we'll see how Love and Death does. There were 5 episodes of Candy, but there are 7 of Love and Death. And from what I saw of Candy, in addition to like a high school play, that also kind of had the qualities of a reenactment, right? In a true crime documentary. Whereas Love and Death plays like an actual dramatic, fully fleshed out miniseries for something like HBO, for a prestige streaming service. Not just depicting the murder of Betty Gore by Candy Montgomery, but having a really interesting commentary on what life is like for women after they get married and have children. What do they do after that? Especially in the late 1970s, early 80s, when most women still didn't get to carve out their own identities. I found that aspect very compelling, and I think it helped to really put you in the shoes of, to some degree, of Candy Montgomery, the writing and Elizabeth Olsen's performance. Now, speaking of the writing, this is from David E. Kelley. He has been working in television for decades. He's famous. He also is married to Michelle Pfeiffer, who I always wonder, why doesn't she show up in any of these miniseries that he does? But she doesn't. But he's behind Love and Death, and it's very much cut from the same cloth as his other recent female-centric shows like Big Little Lies, The Undoing, and 9 Perfect Strangers. And you might notice that Nicole Kidman is in all 3 of those. Why not Michelle Pfeiffer? Anyway, Nicole Kidman. Here, Kidman is clearly aged out of the role of Candy Montgomery. So she's an executive producer, and it makes you realize, this just blew my mind, that in a way, Kidman has chosen her own successor in Hollywood, Elizabeth Olsen. Now, we talk all the time about new talent, picking an actor they feel they're like, and emulating them, both in their image and the roles that they pick and how they build their career. Someone who did that, I think, very clearly is George Clooney with Cary Grant. But also recently we've had Robert Pattinson very much following in the footsteps of Leonardo DiCaprio. He was able to, unlike teen heartthrob himself. And so is Timothy Chalamet, kind of. He's trying to do the Johnny Depp playbook. And Gal Gadot, she tried to mimic Angelina Jolie, but the problem was, DiCaprio and Depp have ignored Pattinson and Chalamet. Angelina Jolie was like, what do you think you're doing? I can still play these roles. And so I think that has hurt Gal Gadot. Also, I'm afraid to say, I think that I agree with many of you, unfortunately, after seeing Wonder Woman 1984, and that's for the most part, Gal Gadot cannot act. But that's very interesting. And so here, Kidman has helped cast, she has been part, because she's an executive producer, Kidman has helped cast Olsen in a role that she herself would have played 10 to 20 years ago. And it makes you realize this is where Elizabeth Olsen's future lies. That's amazing. I hope Elizabeth Olsen realizes that, because Hollywood hasn't quite figured out what to do with her. Even after she has become intensely popular with fans due to the rise of Wanda. Would Kidman have played Wanda back in the day? It makes you think. It makes you think. Kidman, who blossomed after her divorce from Tom Cruise. She had an amazing 1-2 punch that year. The Others and Moulin Rouge, and then she was doing a lot, and while she was advertising those movies and doing the press tours, everyone was asking about her divorce from Tom Cruise. And she had some really bad, horrible stories to tell, about how he was very cold and cruel and businesslike, despite the fact they'd been married for 10 years. He told her he wanted a divorce the minute that they hit 10 years, because of course it had to do with their prenup, etc. And she got a lot of sympathy, I think, from the industry, media, and fans. And also, she had a lot of really good projects. Although, to be fair, as a lovely parting gift, Tom Cruise had produced The Others for her. And Nicole Kidman, while she struggled actually with her career while she was married to Cruise, after they divorced, she has worked nonstop ever since, with no successor in sight, until now. This creates a ton of roles for Olsen to pick up going forward, because she's just as fun to watch as Kidman, managing to be very sexy but also very appealing and relatable to women. That's fantastic. I would dare say in some ways she's even a little bit better than Kidman, because Kidman has always had a stilted aspect to her work, while Olsen, I think, seems much more natural. The entire cast is incredible. What a cast! Elizabeth Olsen and Jesse Plemons, always a delight, hold up the first 2/3 of the series with their steamy yet oddly polite affair. Plemens is particularly good at the polite part. His role is very tricky to play, and I think it's fascinating how it evolves over the course of the miniseries. And he manages to hit every note just right. So does Elizabeth Olsen. Things that I think on paper would seem ridiculous, but they make you believe it and understand the choice. Viewers beware, by the way. The first few episodes make it look as if an affair isn't a bad idea, and they almost play out like a how-to guide. So you might want to keep that in mind with who you watch it with or show it to. I mean, I was like, this seems like it's encouraging affairs. I mean, obviously everything goes south, but this is a weekly release. So for a whole week, you're probably going to think it's not such a bad thing. The first 2 episodes are also very steamy. I think also, particularly episode 2. No nudity, but little else is left to the imagination. In fact, it's the kind of spicy scene that Kidman has specialized throughout her career. So it's interesting also, even in that regard, to see her pass the baton to Olsen. But then, once we get to trial and Olsen's Candy Montgomery freaks out, and you'll see, for certain reasons, kind of takes a bit of a back seat narratively, Tom Pelphrey from Ozark steps up. Oh my goodness, he takes over. Speaking of passing the baton, Olsen and Plemons pass the baton to Pelphrey, who is just as good. Oh my goodness. At first, when the series started, I was like, are you wasting Tom Pelphrey? Because he has very little to do. But then, his scenes in the courtroom, at his law firm, with his tan, tailored suits, slicked back hair, and surprisingly can-do attitude about defending a murderer, he has shades of Christian Bale's Patrick Bateman or Michael Douglas's Gordon Gekko. I mean, not quite at that level, but really strong. Wow. A lot of us are already Tom Pelphrey. I mean, we already love Elizabeth Olsen, Jesse Plemons, and Tom Pelphrey. But this just gives you more reason to love them. Wow, they're so good. If this doesn't get Pelphrey more work, I mean, he's not at the level of the other two, I don't know what will. I mean, it's horrible. And congratulations, by the way. He's, of course, just started a family with Kaley Cuoco. So I think I really want Tom Pelphrey to be a big star. I hope that, again, I hope this does it. All right, so Patrick Fugit, remember him from Almost Famous? He does. I mean, where'd he go? He's back. He does a lot of heavy lifting in the second half of the series as well, and is surprisingly compelling and dynamic as Candy Montgomery's husband. You would think that was a thankless role, and at first it seems like one, but then it gets really interesting, and I was like, wow, he's actually able to hold his own with this cast. I mean, he's not at the level of the Trinity, but he's good. He can keep up. Lily Rabe also has a very difficult role as Betty Gore, the victim, but also clearly troubled. They make it, I think, more complex than from what I saw of the little I watched of the Candy series. And the way Kelley tells you the story throughout, you really feel like you're a member of the jury yourself. And I'd be curious to know what your verdict would be after you watch the show. I was really thinking about it a lot, and I thought it was very interesting. We can talk about it, after you watch the show. Hit me up on Twitter when you finish it, and we can discuss. Now, the only weird thing with the cast is seeing Krysten Ritter relegated to the best friend role. That's Jessica Jones. Yet she has so little to do. It seems like the sort of role for an actress who's working her way up in Hollywood, but instead it comes across as a talented actress still stuck spinning her wheels. I was like, can't we give her something else or something a little bit more to do? Love and Death drops 3 episodes on Thursday, April 27th, then runs weekly through May 25th. Every Thursday there will be a new episode. But that means it will be part of the crossover from HBO Max to Max. I don't think they're going to flip the switch. There will be a little bit of a crossover period. But, I almost feel maybe they should have held it for Max, because I think this would hopefully be a big incentive for you to get the service, because this is such a good show. And I hope people watch this show, even if you watched Candy. It will seem very much like a remake. And you will already know all the incredible twists and turns of the case. Don't look it up. Don't go looking it up. Watch the show. It comes out next week. However, even if you saw Candy and you know the details of the case, you haven't seen these amazing performances. And the show, set in the 1970s, 80s Texas suburbs, has, despite the circumstances, it's a murder, but I also think it plays up the absurdity of what Candy Montgomery and Alan Gore tried to get away with, And I think it shows the coziness, but also the boredom of the world. But I gotta tell you, it was very cozy, and it had a comfort food quality to it. It was just as much, it was up there with the best streaming shows that you just love to check into whenever you can. Just really strong. I watched my screeners. They gave me all the screeners at once. I watched it in 3 nights in a row. And it was great. It was so good. And part of me feels it would be better if you could binge it as well, but we'll see if it can make it as a week-to-week series. David E. Kelley's other shows have, but this is an HBO Max show, not an HBO show. And so far, they haven't been able to have the same impact. I wish this was getting the Sunday or even Monday night HBO treatment, 9 o'clock on Sunday or Monday. Oh, I wish it did. It's good enough to get that. But instead, it'll drop on Thursdays, it's midnight or 3 a.m. whenever HBO Max drops their shows. And I think it's harder for those type of shows to generate conversation, which is a shame, because I absolutely loved it. Oh, so good. Oh, so good. So good at every level. I thought it was just fantastic television. It reminds you, sometimes there's so much to watch and you feel like is there too much on streaming? Are some of the services cheaping out and there's a dip in quality? And then you watch this, although HBO always delivers. You watch this and you're like, great stuff. And this, again, even though it's HBO Max, this is HBO proper quality, in my opinion. All right, maybe if Candy hadn't come out, it would have been, I think this was developed when HBO Max was launching. And so it was supposed to be an incentive to get the service instead of, having the premium cable, HBO. But it just took so long to come out. And I wish they'd upgraded it to HBO proper. I really do. All right, so don't miss it. I think you should really watch it. All right, share your thoughts down below. Subscribe today. And of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.